It was all about, and it always is, at the very center, it's always about meaning frames, what things mean to each other. That's what it's always about once you finally get to the very core of the onion.
I've seen it played out again and again and again in our own conversations, in our family conversations, in any conversation where there's this kind of understanding. It's when someone is expressing something and you are able to reiterate that back to them and they go, exactly. And then they're able to move on. But that word is just intuitively revealing that you did it. You were able to restate what they meant. You were able to touch that point and they felt understood. It's very rewarding once you realize that and understand that. It's like, oh, good. Yes, we got there.
Okay, this might be a bad idea, but Anna, maybe you tell your side of the story from when we were first dating and this pivotal moment.
Well, we have kind of a unique dating story, which is a fun one and could take a long time to share, but I will skip to
a glorious moment.
A glorious moment when we had just taken a trip with roommates to the Grand Canyon, stayed at my grandfather's house, and I'd actually set up the whole thing because you had mentioned once in one of our conversations that was essentially a bucket list item. I don't think you used that term at the time, but that you'd always wanted to do that at some point. And it was a lovely weekend. We had our first kiss. I was about to leave in 2 weeks or so to join the national tour of Beauty and the Beast. And I was planning to do that for a year. And so this relationship was at an interesting point because I'm about to leave. You will not be coming. And essentially our relationship was undefined. And yet we'd had this kiss. It seemed like things were going in a positive direction, in my opinion. And we were driving back to school with a carload of people. And you were like, I don't do long distance relationships. And we had this awkward conversation where you were backpedaling essentially. And I was disappointed, very, a bit embarrassed that my roommates were there. And
this is a bad idea. I can't believe that I invited this. Of all the questions to begin with.
And so it felt like goodbye to me. And when we said goodbye I dropped you off. And when we said goodbye, I think I was maybe even a little teary, but just like,
yeah,
okay,
for sure,
well,
you were.
See you later. And I went home that night and my roommates were like, they did not think highly of you. And we had one of those little so can you believe it? And I was...
And what when your roommate said?
One of my roommates, she was from Albania. And so she had this gorgeous accent and English was her second language. And so she, in her effort to communicate, could be quite blunt at times. And she's like, you are higher than the earth. And he is low. No, I did that wrong. Okay. She said, I don't know how to edit this. This is awkward.
It's fine. Just tell us it again.
Especially with the video and whatnot. Anyway,
don't worry about that.
She said, you are up here. He is lower than the earth. And that meant a lot to me. And so I was done. That night I felt peaceful that I could move on because I felt like I'd been pursuing you kind of, for a couple of months, which is very uncharacteristic of me. I tend to I tended to be a bit gun shy with relationships or with people pursuing me, and here I was doing the reverse. But I was like, okay, he doesn't value this, and he doesn't think I'm worth it. So I'm out. I'm ready to move on. This has not been a bed of roses anyway, because I've had to go out of my comfort zone again and again and again. I look forward to not having to go out of my comfort zone for a while. I'm moving on. And then
this episode is not a bed of roses so far. I'll tell you that.
and so then I went to bed, and within a few minutes, one of my roommates knocked on the door and said that you were on the phone. And I was like, oh, okay. And I get on the phone with you, and you had decided you wanted to listen. And I think you said something along those lines, like, I want to listen. Tell me what you're thinking. And I think the next hour and a half or 2 hours, I communicated to you what my intents had been, because I'd felt misunderstood. I felt like you saw me as just kind of this girl who was chasing you, one of many, maybe, or and I
that gives the sort of the wrong impression about my desirability at that time. But nevertheless, you are expressing in this moment how you felt misunderstood.
Well, how you had said it was like one of the silly girls.
This is
kind
terrible.
of,
This is terrible. Cut everything.
I don't think you'd said that before, but maybe later as we, dated and got married and whatnot. But yeah, you and you listened, and you would restate back to me what you understood, and I would either correct it or agree with it. But I felt like you were understanding my point of view. And I think I ended the conversation essentially on, I think I'm good. I think I'm great. I think I'm worth something here. And I am not interested in dating someone who doesn't think I'm great.
Who doesn't get it.
And that would be selling myself short. That would be, an absolute disservice to myself, to my value as a human being, to continue to pursue a relationship with someone who didn't value me. And yeah, and I think that's kind of where my conversation ended. And
that was the core. Yeah. That was the core of it. That was the essential message you wanted me to hear, and maybe to some extent, at least, you were able to formulate that language in that moment as well. But carry on.
Yeah, that captured it. And I did feel like I was able to get it all out. I felt like I didn't need to hold anything back. I mean, I wasn't unleashing on you, but it was really important to me that I was able to, maybe you feel differently, but it wasn't emotionally, like I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying.
Exactly.
It wasn't an emotional dam being broken. It was a real conversation.
It wasn't an unregulated conversation. It
right.
wasn't you weren't in emotional unregulation.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing that you need, an important place to be in when you're going to have a conversation like this. I know that, in all of our years of marriage, if I'm really emotional or you're really emotional, it's almost impossible to have this kind of conversation at that time. And so.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because the nature of the kind of listening that is transformational is that it takes a lot of emotional regulation to do it.
Yes.
the highest levels.
Well, and I might say something I've noticed, and in this, story that we're sharing right now, there may have been, there probably were many things that I said that you would take issue with, that you'd be like, that's not how it was for me. That's not true even necessarily for me and my story. Because when I've been on the other end and learning this skill from you, that is how I feel sometimes, where I want to cut in and go, hang on, that's not true. That's not how it was. And you have to shelve that. You have to be emotionally regulating, like you said, to be able to really try and understand where the other person's coming from, even if it feels untrue, allowing the space for them to explain why that's true to them, or for them to go, you know what, maybe that's an overstatement, but giving the space for them to be able to express something strongly and then adjust it, or say, this is why I feel strongly about it.
There's lots to unpack there. Was there anything, I sort of jumped in there with a thought. Was there anything else in the story that you wanted to express? Anything that ties it together? I'm not. You're looking at me like I'm looking. No, I'm not. I'm not leading the witness. I just thought that there were. You were saying, well, that's sort of where I finished in the conversation. Was there anything else there, or are you complete in what you were trying to say?
Well, it was very gratifying. It was a gratifying conversation because I felt understood. I felt like I felt validated, and your response was validating. You said, I wish I could remember everything about that conversation. I only remember a line here and there, but you said essentially at the end, do you remember what you said? I'm going to take a stab at it, but you might.
I only really remember the version of the story that we have shared since, so I don't know if it's really exactly what was said, but what I
recall. It was about calling me.
Yes, no, I said something like, look, you can call me anytime you want.
That's right. You did
say
that.
And
I was like,
because I'll call you every day.
Anytime. Done with that.
The whole point of everything I've just shared, I'm done. It's on you now, sir.
Yes, but you followed it up with what you just said. But I will call you. Did you say every day? Something?
Yeah, I did. That's how I remember it now. And that's how it's been.
Yes.
So that's I don't know if it is actually literally true that it's been every single day since, but I think it might be true.
Yeah, I think if we went through it, you
since.
would count on one hand over 24 years the days that we actually didn't talk.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be maybe travel or literally that kind of a situation where you're in different time zones or something like that. But
yeah, super rare.
Yeah, the longer you go from that moment, the bigger the pivot is, in a sense, or the more significant the pivot of that moment becomes. Because if we were talking about that conversation a week later, well, it already had an impact because the relationship was already different. And of course,
it was different from that moment. It was different the next day.
And one of the reasons it was different, from my point of view, one of the reasons it's different is because I have different information. One of the reasons that a certain kind of listening is so powerful is that you're dealing with proper data. And my sense, just generally speaking about listening, and this is even, I would have made this observation prior to the last 10 to 15 years digital revolution that puts a device in everybody's pocket, in everybody's hand at almost every moment. So it would have been true even before that massive additional obstacle, is that people aren't really listening at all. So So what happens if you have a situation where you're hardly listening at all to each other is that you deal with very low quality information. The ratio of noise to meaning is really bad. And so people just assume what's going on, make up their own stories. And of course it happens in marriage. And of course it happens in marriage in perpetuity. The risk is there. And so you can be really upset with each other, or you can have some big argument about something. And strangely, you're not actually arguing with each other. You are arguing. You are both arguing. It is awful. But you're not arguing with each other because you're arguing against the straw man of the other person. You're arguing against a story in your head. And so this, I think, is sort of the primary form of relationship suffering, is because the pain of being misunderstood is such an absolute hell, because that's so disorienting and so painful. Okay, so that's sort of the table stakes, but then because there isn't proper listening going on, you're just in a state of that all the time. Because you're not actually dealing with correct information. So how wrong can you be? You just are going to be wrong constantly with each other.
I think there's so much variety in how people listen and the stories that people construct. But yeah, I feel like this skill of listening, of getting, as you said, correct information, I think is how you put it, cuts through at least a couple of challenges, in that, like, sometimes a person constructs a story filling in the blanks, and it's just wrong. And then sometimes, because I don't want to attach it necessarily to gender, I think either gender can do this. Maybe more women tend to do that, but
creating stories.
Yeah, but maybe not. But sometimes I feel like with what I observe in you, and I think that might be more of a male trait, is they're looking for logic, for data. And when you were talking about how you're not even arguing with each other, that I've felt that myself in conversations where it's like, what are we talking about anymore? I feel like we're talking about
we don't even know what we're talking about.
Yeah, like, you said this. Well, I don't remember saying that. And then you're arguing about, yeah, you did. No, I didn't. And it's like, this isn't even relevant. It's just an argument about how well we remember what happened. Those kinds of data points, I feel like, so this method, the skill of listening, cuts that out in a really helpful way as well. So it cuts out the storytelling that's incorrect, and it can cut out the data points that feel factual and like proof, and like you said, they're a straw man. Would that be the right way of saying that?
How does it cut out the go, you said this, no, then you said that, then I said this. How does this method of listening do that?
Well, you're the expert, but in my experience with it, you're taking a turn. And so one person is able to communicate.
Oh, I hear what you're saying now. Okay, I understand.
And then the other person is checking in. Is this what you're saying?
Okay. Let's just do like a little mini unit on this. So,
okay.
Well, I'm not about to share anything you don't know. We've talked about this before, of course, but Carl Rogers was arguably the most influential psychotherapist of the 20th century. Now, normally, if you just ask somebody on the street, they probably would say Freud or something like that. They would be. There's other names that seem to conjure up the imagination of people outside of psychology. But if you ask the therapists themselves, and it's been done twice at quite a large database of respondents, or who has been the most significant thinker in this space. I think it was done once in like the 80s, and then it was done again 20 years later. And both times, Carl Rogers was the most significant. And so it's interesting because he's not a name that anymore is well known to the general populace. Listeners to this podcast will know his name because I've talked about him multiple times in small vignettes here and there. But when he became a psychotherapist, there was the dominant assumption of how you would communicate with a patient was more Freudian. And that was, well, look, there are these subconscious patterns that people have that are causing their suffering. And your job is really to kind of almost scrape it out of them. It's like your job is to kind of rough them up in a certain kind of way. It is still listening based, but it's like you are just trying to get them to admit which part of the Freudian theory is at play right now. So you are sort of in pushing an agenda onto the patient and trying to get them to confess. More like that, a little bit more like a confessional, or if you're the police, you're in a
interrogation.
An interrogation, a bit more like an interrogation. And so at first he was trained the same way, Carl Rogers. But then what I think is really amazing and subtle about his story, he's written 2 books and lots of other academic publications. But I've read about his story, in this subtle way, he wasn't like a radical screaming out against the way things were done. But what he did is he started to trust his own experience, which is really interesting. He first did it in his own life, in challenging some of the assumptions that he'd been taught from his family. And then as a therapist, he starts going, well, what I'm actually myself observing with the people I work with is this. And so he trusted that data over the mental models that he'd been given about how things work. So he's using the pure data in front of him. And he, like a couple of other really significant psychotherapists who I happen to either got to know or have studied, would record the sessions he was having and would listen to them again and again and again, and even do it with permission with other students. And so they were studying this dance of communication at a really high level of precision. And in the process, they started to codify that there was a way of being with a patient. And if you would be this way with them, you could help them heal at a deeper level and a higher rate of success than the models they'd been using in the past. And they could even get to the point where they would listen to an interview and they would see when the therapist interrupted the flow. So a well-intended intervention that would actually take them off path that would otherwise have helped them to heal and make sense of things. And so in this process, he started to find, if you can, his term was empathic listening, and he even had sort of empathic restating. And he actually really interestingly grew really, he started to develop a repulsive reaction to that term that he had coined, because people took, and it's like, from the poem, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. He watched that terminology being taken and massively oversimplified, removing the heart and power of it, and then saying it was the same thing.
Removing the actual empathy part of it.
Removing the empathy part of it, removing the depth of it, the heart that's involved. And it turned into this this idea like this. Well, what you have to do is when somebody says something, you repeat the last few words back to them. And that's what it became. And if you ever do that to somebody, you feel stupid doing it and they feel stupid having it done to them. It's a patronizing thing. So it's so far from what he'd observed.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rogerian method has been taught to a lot of psychotherapists, although not all of them. So there's a huge range still. And I think any would be better. You know, any person in any field, including therapy, would be better with Rogerian thinking than without it. But within the gateway of Rogerian listening is a whole universe, a whole world. And once you step into it, it's like stepping through the wardrobe into Narnia, that you suddenly discover what it is to live in another person's world, another person's life, to see things through their, I say through their eyes, and that itself almost doesn't quite capture it, but it's a kind of 3D empathy, it's a visual listening, and then all of the other tools that you can use in life, like systems thinking, like asking great questions, like discernment, like perspicacity, that ability to see what's going on underneath the surface. I mean, so many other learning and intelligence tools and mental models are all relevant, but it's like relevant in an inverted way, because instead of applying that only to our own lives or our own problems and so on, you can do it within somebody else's world, and nothing is richer, nothing is more satisfying, nothing is deeper, and it's a two-way connection. So anyway, that's like the unit of background. But when we say a certain kind of listening, this is at least part of what it is that we're talking about. So, yeah. I don't really remember why I was suddenly giving that unit, but it seemed important.
Well, I think because we are talking about it without actually explaining what it is. And I think you wanted to take a moment to go, okay, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to that story from before we were married, I mean, it was a very distinctive type of experience for me. It was a very different experience for me than for you, but I was able to correct perceptions I had. So that's part of what's happening, because I'm getting this richer data and insight. And then because I wasn't interrupting after 10 minutes or 15 minutes, it meant that you were also learning more and able to express more at a deeper level. So that means that the data is getting even richer. The meaning is getting even more valuable. It's more vulnerable, but it's even more valuable. And so by the end of that, you know, from your point of view, you're like, okay, well, I've been heard, and that feels a lot better than not being heard. I don't feel misunderstood anymore, so that feels better. We're connected because we literally have a common understanding.
Yeah, there was a resolution for me.
Resolution. But I also understood differently. You know, you know, I don't really think you can listen in this way without it changing listener and listened to.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's why people, well, one reason people don't do it is they really haven't experienced it. No one's done it for them, and they've never been trained how to do it. So they were trained how to write, they were trained how to read, but they weren't trained how to listen. So that's one huge obstacle. Mm-hmm. But another obstacle is just, it takes courage to learn. And
well, it's a vulnerable process.
Well, tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, as the person who is seeking to be understood, you may, in your exploration of trying to explain to this person what you're trying to explain, you may reveal things about yourself that are vulnerable, that are personal, that are intimate, and emotionally intimate, that then is out there. And so that definitely takes courage and trust with the person that you're talking to. So with those precursors, yeah, that can eliminate a certain willingness to even engage in this type of communication and this type of listening.
Okay, so now that's on the side of the person who's being listened
Sharing.
to.
Yeah.
Right, the sharer.
Mm-hmm.
It's vulnerable for them too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is like the onion of human systems. On the surface, it's relatively trivial and relatively safe, and then as you peel away layers, it becomes richer and richer in meaning nutrients, but it's also more and more vulnerable, so that by the time you get to
a connection, that's made.
Yeah, it seems like you're saying something slightly different when you say connection made, because I'm just describing like the journey of from unimportant and safe to valuable and vulnerable, but you're making a different point, which I think is legitimate to make.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, the connection is the consequence of it.
Yes, the connection is the consequence, right? Because you can't, I mean, especially if you say it's mutually done, you just can't not have a connection if you are sharing what's vulnerable and important, and you're discovering things about yourself, and you're disclosing that, and they're doing the same. They're disclosing, and they're sharing, and they're learning new things.
Right, they're learning of all of those things about you. They're saying them back to you, so they understand.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. I was once went for a photo shoot, and
I remember this, yeah.
And in the photo shoot, I felt like I was experiencing the photographer equivalent of the kind of Rogerian listening we're talking about. And,
and you were the one being listened to, which...
Correct. So it was inverted.
Mm-hmm.
And the connection was really like strong and surprising to me. And it was one of those good eye-opening moments of like, oh my goodness, there's an inherent intimacy to this that's so strange that could be achieved so quickly, and in one sense so involuntarily. I didn't go in there thinking, oh, I'm just going to have a really kind of sense of intimate connection with the photographer in this shoot. And yet I came out and I was talking to you about it like, well, I got to be honest that and you had thoughts about that at the time, but also now, I think.
If I remember right, you talked with the photographer about this phenomenon. And the photographer was like, yeah, this is how you have to be careful, because people will fall in love with you.
Yes. She was expressing that was her own experience as a photographer, that she had to be careful about that, because the people that she was in the room with could suddenly feel so much connection. They could fall in love with her because they're so hungry for that, and then they suddenly experience it. It's sort of piercing to them, but they hardly know what they're experiencing. Yeah, and that's the phrase that you sort of took away from it. It's like warning. Yeah.
She named something that I'd been trying to communicate.
Which
she just was so succinct. Just the responsibility that comes with this, and the caution that comes with this, because people can feel this connection with you, and they don't know what to do with it, and it's not an invitation for a relationship beyond friendship, or that kind of barrier. So it's Yeah. And when you share that with someone, it is like, okay, how emotionally intimate, how comfortable am I with this emotional intimacy with other people, and what level of that, or, and how to navigate that.
Yes, so it's both warning and desirability in the same observation, because it's like, yeah, warning, this can make people fall in love with you. And it's like, well, lots of people listening do want people to fall in love with them. And certainly we all want people to fall in love with us to some extent. Maybe it's to have your spouse fall back in love with you. Maybe it's to fall back in love with them. Maybe it's your children, a certain kind of falling in love, right? Like a sense of really different kind, obviously, but a sense of reconnection and at a deep level. And I can think back now. I feel a bit flooded in this moment of some of the experiences that have taken place over these years. On the one hand, I'm thinking of a conversation I had around the same time, maybe a year or two after you and I had that conversation before we got married, when there was a couple that were, I just went to visit them one day, and you could cut the awkwardness with a knife in that room. It was so cold, and they were just newly married, 1-year-old baby. They're both, college students, and they're just trying to make it through. And I mean, maybe a bit presumptuously, I sort of offered to just kind of facilitate a little bit of a conversation, using this Rogerian rule, which is, if you're in a conflict, you stop the conflict, you sort of stop the conversation, and you say, okay, let's implement this rule. You only get to say your point after you have said the other person's point to their satisfaction. And I mean, this is the best test for the question I posed at the very beginning of the podcast of, well, how would you know if you were a great listener? I didn't quite pose that question at the beginning. It was more like, what would they say? How would they describe you as a listener? But when people claim that they're a good listener, or they just assume they are, more like that most of the time, well, how would you know? How do you know? How do you know if you actually have anything like the right idea? How do you know the story in your head about them is even close to being accurate? It could be 100% wrong, literally 100% wrong, unless you have some mechanism for being able to navigate it. Now, there are mechanisms. You could just say what you think, and they can say, no, that's not what I think, and so on.
Well, but speaking of mechanisms.
Yeah, go.
You talking about the situation of this young couple was like the answer to when you and I are too emotional to have a good listening session. That third party is necessary, right, in those situations, and you were able to provide that for them because they were obviously in like emotional, like state, right, where to expect them to be able to take turns and restate in that state. Having been there myself, yeah, good luck. It's not going to happen. And so having you be able to be a facilitator in that moment is really important information for me, even, to go, I hadn't really made that connection, because I kind of thought, well, you just got to wait until you're calm, and then maybe you can have that conversation then, and just, wait till you're there. But that's a perfect example of when you are unable to do it, there is a role for this third party to be able to facilitate.
Yeah, I love that, because you're just describing two distinct processes. There's the listening process itself, right? That restating to each other, to each other's satisfaction. And then there's the emotional self-regulation element. And having a third party can help with both pieces, because the third party can have the skill, right? So they can be trained in the skill prior to even arriving, and they are not emotionally triggered in the same way as the parties. They have so much less to lose. It's not that they necessarily are more emotionally mature. It's just that the stakes are so much lower.
Right. I mean, you've been able to do that at times with our children, where they are. I mean, that reminded me of them crying, emotional. This is hard to communicate, and you facilitating that, and having to tolerate a certain amount of strong emotion.
There's with the couple story, just tying that up, and then I want to shift back to what you just said, that they did start doing it, and occasionally I'd have to sort of step in and go, well, I don't think that is what that person is. And I would say, I think this is what they're feeling, experiencing. And then we would look to that person, sort of tell me where we're wrong. Oh, yes, that is what I'm saying. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And so they went back and forth, layer by layer. Yep, word exactly. I want you to explain that in a moment too. But as you're going deeper and deeper, and what I noticed even all these years later is that they were moving closer together on the couch. They literally, physically, and I don't just mean turning, I mean they actually moved physically from being as far as they could be on the couch to closer and closer and closer, till by the end they were emotional and they were connected. And it did feel like I had watched somebody go from being, I won't say out of love, because that's not right, but in a kind of cold war, into these two are in love, and it did feel like that.
Emotional intimacy, that connection.
And it was all done. It didn't take a long time. I mean, I don't know, it was an hour. It might have been 2 hours, but it wasn't like this was weeks and weeks or something, or it's this huge journey. And I was just in touch with the husband, at least recently, and he said like it was actually a pivotal moment, a turning point, because this misunderstanding had been growing over the last year. So it wasn't just, we just had a bit of a row today and we haven't resolved it. It was like a genuine and deep misunderstanding about how they were thinking about each other, and why one went quiet and what that meant, or they don't care. And then the other person, how they act and what that means. And it was all about, and it always is, at the very center, it's always about meaning frames and what things mean to each other. That's what it's always about. Once you finally get to the very core of the onion. So that's that.
Good.
Now come back to this. You picked up on the word exactly. You want to tell us a bit about that?
I feel like I'm just sharing what you taught me. It's just an observation I believe that you had, and I've seen it played out again and again and again in our own conversations, in our family conversations, in any conversation where there's this kind of understanding. And it's when someone is expressing something and you are able to reiterate that back to them. I mean, the Rogerian method, essentially, and they go, exactly. And then they're able to move on. But that word, it's not even, it's just intuitively revealing that you did it. You were able to restate what they meant. You were able to touch that point, and they felt understood. And it's very rewarding once you realize that and understand that. It's like, oh, good. Yes, we got there.
Yeah, it's been translated now into oh, I got an exactly. And so it's almost like a sort of ring the gong moment.
Yeah.
Where if I'm in a conversation and one of the children will restate back or try to just explain what I'm trying to say, and I'll be like, oh yeah, exactly. And I don't even notice I've done it, because as you say, this is very natural, intuitive word that we use. And they'll like,
They'll be
yay,
like,
I got it exactly from Dad. And
yeah.
and so yeah, that's a very particular linguistic thing. Like you can notice for that. How many exactlies can you get in a conversation? How many exactlies can you get in a day? And or even just in this one conversation, can I get it one time from somebody so that they, they're going, yeah, that is just what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's just what I'm feeling. And it names it and it pinpoints it. It's a very satisfying sensation for all involved.
Yeah. It's very rewarding. It feels like you're meeting a need.
Yeah. Well, you're a little less alone in the universe. Now, you mentioned I've tried to do this with the children. And the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was a complete, Herculean failure at this. When there was a, one of the children was feeling really emotional, frustrated. I think they were all there. Certainly 3 of the 4 were there. And they were starting to get into this issue.
What were their ages? Do you remember? Ish?
Let's say maybe
between 9 and
eldest
15?
was 16 maybe. Yeah, I was thinking 15, 16, so 9 and 15. I think that sounds about right. And so it was already becoming emotional, and I thought, oh yeah, I can facilitate this. I can help them. And one of the rules that we'll have around this, if we're doing it in a formal sense, is okay. You only get to. It can be any object, but like
you hold the whatever.
You hold the spoon. You hold the pen. You only, and you get to say it, and the other person gets the right to get the pen back if they explain to you to your satisfaction. And I was trying to facilitate this, but I wasn't being honest with myself about the pressure I felt to get to work and to get to an impending meeting. And so the closer I got to that meeting, the more frustrated I got at the process that we were engaged in. And I'm sort of going,
the lack of progress.
That's not what they're feeling, and I'm like, this needs to happen. And I'm impatient and I'm getting more and more emotional. And so I felt like I drove that to complete discombobulation, like just kind of emotional explosion for everybody. And I'm going.
Yeah, it's a great example of that third party needing to be emotionally, impartial
regulated,
and
emotionally
exactly
regulated. Yeah, that's right. And so I remember afterwards, about half an hour later, that's not immediate, but I went to every person. I was like, "Yeah, totally sorry, that's me. We'll come back to this later." So there was quite a quick return to normality that I noticed at the time. Like there was all this dysregulation, but the speed of returning to regulation, I think, is a good test of a culture and a relationship.
Yeah,
because there will obviously be dysregulation between people, obviously.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so therefore there will be in relationships, and therefore there will be with children, and therefore there will be with those children with each other. Like, of course there is. So it's how quickly can we return to regulation? I think is a good test.
Yep.
A few days go past, and that unresolved issue comes back up again. It was a Sunday after we'd sat down, we'd eaten dinner, and the subject comes back up again. And so now everybody's eaten, so that's a good moment to do it. And by this point, I didn't have the pressure. And also, I remember trying to take a much lighter facilitator role. That this was
interesting.
before,
yeah, you probably felt a little like forcing this resolution before.
100%.
And the second time, it's like, okay.
100%. I don't remember really thinking that in the moment consciously, but yes, I'm trying to force the resolution right now, please. Because I got this thing here in 20 minutes and then 10 minutes and 5 minutes. And it took quite a while. I remember it being a couple of hours. And I also remember...
I don't even know if I stayed the whole time. I think I might have taken off, honestly. Like, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
You know, sometimes
I
I'm
can
like,
see
whew,
that.
I'm
exhausted from that.
I'm taking a break. This doesn't really have to do with me. Greg's got it covered. Thank you, Greg.
And also,
Yeah.
I remember after about an hour into it, one of the children who had now felt they were resolved, that they had participated, and there was no issue, the psychedelic effect was solved. They left, and they asked, "Is it okay if I leave? You know, like it's all right. You know, we've resolved this." And they left, and then the remaining, there was a couple of people still left at the table, working through the things that were unresolved. What
Bless
I
you.
noticed, well, but the thing is, the truth is I didn't do very much in that conversation. It was one of the most successful. I don't mean my success. I mean, it was one of the most successful things I'd seen.
Right, that they were able to do it themselves.
It was so important to me that they could do that. I thought it was, I had this sort of intergenerational moment flash in my eyes. You know, I don't know if it was in the moment or after, of like, my goodness, if they are able to do this, then they have reduced the probability of a cataclysmic conflict erupting and disrupting the family, this family of origin, even a generation from now, or 2 generations from now. Like, I don't mean from a sense of control. It's just, if you have the skills as young teenagers and have had an experience resolving a highly complex emotional misunderstanding and issue that people are feeling strongly about, and you have successfully done that, well, now you know you can resolve these kinds of conflicts that split people apart. You know, I mean...
Yeah. I mean, what a gift.
And of course, we've seen plenty of so much communication that isn't like that, or doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah.
So either failures or
yeah. I mean, and one success does not mean it's now a
embedded.
skill. Yeah, that you can call on whenever you need, but it's a drop in the bucket, at least, you know, of progress and building.
Yeah,
that.
I thought it was symbolically. I thought it was symbolically important, and the fact that I hardly did anything. You know, they knew the rule, they knew how it operated, they were genuinely doing it. I sort of had to step in just occasionally, not even to say, well, I don't think that's what they're saying, but just like, okay, hold on, I don't know if they've been heard. You know, just try a little more. It was very, very light facilitation, and I thought, yeah, I mean, imagine. It was definitely one of those imagine moments too. Imagine if...
Well, if we could all do this.
Well, if we could just be less bad at it.
Yeah.
What if I could just be a little less bad?
Yeah, no, I find it really difficult at times, especially emotionally. If I'm trying to do this for you and you're saying things that I'm like, this, I don't agree with that. That's a little triggering or whatever, you know, and the emotional regulation, as you say, of needing to go, okay, so you see it in this way where, I mean, this isn't what you say, but, you know, where I have really, I'm a bad guy here, over, you know, I'm hurting you. You know, when that's not the intent or anything, but being able to restate those kinds of emotional things is not easy, but it's so useful, so valuable.
What it takes is courage, and courage feels awful. And Rogers says it himself that we don't always have it.
I remember, Greg, the first time that I restated for you.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. I don't remember the topic, but I remember we were newlyweds. We were living on the road because I was on tour, and we were sitting in our car. And you're like, I just need to be listened to, you know? And I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to do this, but let's try. And I think you kind of coached me through it. Certainly at the beginning. And by the end,
does feel a little tyrannical. I need you to listen to me, and
no,
this
but I was
is
game.
how I need you to listen to me.
No, I was game.
No,
I was like,
tyrannical.
well, because
It's
I had
you.
received, I had been a beneficiary of it, so I didn't need to be sold. I wanted this skill, and I wanted to be able to do that for you. And I could, you were good at expressing the need to have someone listen to you. And so it was like, okay, let's try and do this. And by the end of that, I remember feeling really proud of myself. And like I'd learned some stuff. I wasn't sure that I could go and do it again. In fact, I don't think I felt like like it was in me, like I had that skill yet, but it was neat to have felt like a participant. I felt good about it, and I was happy to have been able to help you out. And so it's just a memory of mine from our early marriage, learning, about how to do that.
Well, one of the things that's so interesting to me about that is it has become a part of the air of our marriage relationship. Like, I can't really conjure an imagination of the last 24 and a half years without this having been a part of it, which is not the same as saying that I have always listened this way for you and you've always listened that way for me.
Definitely not. Yeah.
There's every day I get it wrong, every single day and multiple times a day. So it's
right,
not
both
like
of us. Yeah. Genuinely.
I can't remember a time where this wasn't a part of the vocabulary and range of motion of our relationship. And I suppose that makes sense because, let's say part one is, pre-marriage, and then part two is the memory that you have in the car while we're on tour. Those are early formative experiences. And in a similar way with the children, my sort of sense of hope in that moment, that well, if there's some huge rift at some point, there's a mechanism now for returning.
Yeah.
In a similar way, I feel the same for us, which is, maybe we just argue as much as anybody does. I don't know. I mean, that could be true. It's very hard to see into other people's marriages or relationships.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's always this understanding that there's a mechanism that we can understand each other again, and we can be understood again. And so in the flight plan, this idea that a plane is off track 90% of the time, in the flight plan of our lives, you never have to go too far off track. You will be off track. We are off track. But you have a mechanism that goes, well, we don't have to even go a week like that. We don't have to go a month like that, a quarter, a year in pain and misunderstood, because you have a mechanism for course correcting.
Yeah.
And actually, as I say that, I feel a sort of a kind of empathic pain. Like I think about it a little like Luke Skywalker, where he feels like or maybe it's Yoda, I can't remember, who feels the tremor in the Force. And I feel this sort of tremor in the Force around the pain, the unbelievable pain of so many people who simply don't have that mechanism of course correction. Because the level of suffering that is possible is almost unlimited, and so therefore almost unimaginable. If somebody can go a month, a year, a decade, feeling genuinely and deeply misunderstood in the most important relationship or relationships of their lives, what is that? But an I don't even like using the word hell particularly, but what else can you say but
Absolutely.
the absolute hell of being misunderstood for such a long time?
Yeah.
And
Misery.
I suppose in one yes, misery. Exactly. No, that's not a good time to laugh right there. But in that sense, I think I've taken it for granted.
Mm.
I have taken it for granted that we have had it's a bit like if you're playing, if you go bowling and you put down what would you call those? The
pins?
No, not the pins, the side,
the
that stops,
buffer things that can
stops.
Bumper
Yeah.
that go in the gutters?
Yeah, it's the thing that stops the
ball from going in the gutter?
Correct.
Yeah.
Whatever those are called.
I'd say bumper. I don't know if that's
the buffer.
right.
Everybody listening is like, this is the word. And we could both say exactly if they were saying it. It's like we've had some kind of equivalent like that to be able to readjust much faster than if you had to just kind of live in that unresolved pain. For sometimes it can be, I think, years, decades even. Someone shared with me recently that he cannot speak with his daughter, and his daughter cannot speak with him. So when they're in the same house together, the same room together, it is total silence between them. He doesn't dare to speak now because he just knows it will be too painful for him and for her. And so every so often, if he thinks the feeling is good enough, he'll just touch her on the shoulder or on the arm. Just his attempt at saying, I love you. That is now the limit. Not that isn't a beautiful thing to hope for and to do, but how much pain is in that vignette glimpse of their lives right now.
I think I've taken it for granted, absolutely. I have just known that I could turn to you and ask for your help with this. Not that I do find it hard for some reason. I find it hard because there's already tension between us, and then for me to humble myself and be like, hey, I think I really need to be listened to right now, is a hard ask for me, but it shouldn't be. I mean, anytime I've asked, you will, not pretending that you're like, oh, absolutely, but you'll be like, you'll be like, yes, okay,
put on
give
the
me
shield,
a minute, or yeah, you'll say that. Let me put on my armor. So I have taken that for granted, and I'm so grateful that it has been, as you said, like a bumper, something that we can turn to before things get really bad in our relationship or with our children.
Before they freeze into a bad shape.
Yeah. Even if they're frozen, I mean, they can unfreeze. But I'm grateful that this has been something that you've brought to our marriage and has definitely helped us and helped our children. I mean, maybe in the future sometime we can on the podcast kind of do either a role play or an actual listening session. I mean, that could get kind of personal, but I don't know. Maybe that's something we can do.
That's another terrible idea.
Yeah, probably.
No, it's not though. I mean, we'll see. But I mean, I actually I am game for it though. Because I genuinely think it would be interesting to listen to and observe the messiness of the process too.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's so much easier to talk about resolved history basically 25 years ago, But that's easy. Or even these conversations from a few years ago with the children or so on. Like this is much, much safer. Whatever wound was there are like, the worst they would be now are like scars to show for it. They're not open wounds. And it is raw to do this in practice. And
yeah.
So I think demonstrating that this is the toughest. Doing it, you and I really listening and understanding each other around a jugular issue together. That's the hardest test of all the listening.
Yes. Yeah.
It's much harder than doing it with the children, which is also the next level of challenge. And it's 10 times harder than doing it for somebody you just meet or somebody that I'm helping to facilitate through the process. Because the risks are so much greater if it's the children, and of course so much greater, for me and for us. Well, that's an interesting challenge. You've put it out there now. And now I think
wonder
we're
if
going to have...
there'd be anyone willing of your listeners to go on air with such a thing. Because I know it's vulnerable, but to be able to go on air and try it out and have it bless their lives and also bless the listeners' lives. But
so what you mean is not a single individual, not like an intervention, a coaching session, which, way back at the beginning of the podcast, there were some examples of that. You mean two people about an issue, a challenge that they're facing.
Yeah. And
I'm just facilitating for both of them.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's do these actions at the end of this. If you are someone who is interested in that, you're willing to do that, you just email us. You just go to gregmckeown.com. There's a place you can send an email. I get lots of emails from listeners about various things. You can go on there and say, yes, pick us. We'd like to do it. We'd be willing. So do that. That's the call to action here now, spontaneous call to action. And then I think, of course, Anna and I need to talk about this separately off air, but I think that if I'm asking others to put their hand up, it does make sense that I should put my hand up here and be willing to do that with you around, any number of real issues, everyday things, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, stay tuned for that. Here we are, the subject of subjects. This podcast wouldn't exist. This marriage wouldn't exist without this subject. And maybe it's true that the next version of this podcast is just been brought into existence also through this type of listening. Anna, always so great to have you to be the conversation partner. But this was a different kind of feeling. Yes, pleasure is the word.
So fun.
Exactly. Love you, Anna.
I love you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, for watching. Really, thank you. What stood out to you today? What is something you can do differently about it? What's an action you can take? Who can you share this conversation with now that this conversation is coming to a close?